Hello and welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for One Froggy Evening, released on the 31st of December 1955. It's the 758th in the series and it's directed by, who else? Chuck Jones. You can find this beautiful restoration on the Looney Tunes Golden Collection Volume 2 DVD set and on the Looney Tunes Platinum Collection Volume 1 Blu-ray set. And I'll have links below to those sets. You won't find it on YouTube, it is under copyright. So those two sets are the best way of owning this short. Looney Tunes will always come and go when it comes to streaming services. This way you can have it in your library and watch it whenever you want. So before I do the usual spiel that I do in all my reviews, this is particularly special because it's taken me 5 years to get to this point. I've taken a look at all Looney Tunes shorts from start to finish, so from the very first Bosco short sinking in the bathtub all the way to now. Yes, I've had to go back and redo a lot of the old videos I had into full-fledged reviews due to issues of copyright and all that. But then again, it's not really that much of a chore because it gives me an excuse to rewatch some of those, so it's okay. It is what it is. But to reach what some consider to be one of the pinnacles of the animated short, I mean, just ask my friend Steven Spielberg.
I think there's no cartoon that holds a candle to that, ever. Nothing's ever come close. That's the Citizen Kane of the animated short.
Totally agree with you, Steven, and thanks for joining me in this brief clip. Okay, I'm kidding. That was from the Chuck Jones documentary, which if you haven't seen, definitely give a watch. And it's called Extremes and In-Betweens. So quite a few people wanted to be on this track, and who can blame them? This is one of the most popular shorts of all time. I mean, it's no Buddy's Bearcats, the greatest short ever made. Okay, I'm kidding, of course, but before I get into the synopsis and the trivia stuff, let's bring on all our guests.
Howdy, folks. It's Eli Copperman here to give my thoughts on One Froggy Evening.
So it's come to this. One of the iconic Chuck Jones cartoons ever. If you don't count What's Upper Ducker, the Hunting Trilogy.
Hello, it's me again, John. And today I want to talk about one of my all-time favorite cartoons, One Froggy Evening. This is a cartoon that I really love ever since I remember watching it as a kid on the Golden Collection. And it's one that I think everyone at least has seen it once.
Alright, so you're going to hear my guests in between all the stuff I'll be saying as I go through the trivia and go through the short itself. And then after that, my good friend Manny Cruz, the Tooney Tenor, he's going to break down all of the musical aspect of this short because obviously the only voices you hear in this whole short is this frog singing. So I'll have his segment in a timestamp, so if you ever want to revisit this video and just look at the music part again or whatever, it's all in there. While with the other guests, I'll spread their thoughts throughout the review. Manny's section will be its own separate segment. So in case you haven't seen this one, I know, okay? Just about everyone has seen this short and knows what it's about. I'm just doing it for the consistency, okay? You have a demolition worker. He finds a frog in a box in the cornerstone of a building, and to his amazement, the frog just puts on a top hat and starts singing. Thinking he can get rich off of this, he ends up going to a talent agency, but as he soon finds out, the frog seems to only sing in front of him and no one else can hear him.
And that's a really funny idea. It really gives you a lot of possibilities to create that storyline with that. The whole idea of the cartoon is hilarious.
So it's a wonderful parable of greed and how some things just never change over the years.
I would say that this is probably the most iconic Looney Tunes or Merry Melody short that Chuck Jones ever did. Like, it is one of the most beloved shorts from their filmography. And it's easy to see why. This cartoon is kind of a combo of a comedy and a bit of a tragedy. It's a tragedy because, you know, this guy, you want to see this guy be able to show the world who this beautiful singing frog is and for him to be truly discovered. But it's also funny because if you really think about it, he's getting rightfully punished for trying to reveal the talents of the singing frog to everyone, because if you watch the cartoon truly closely, you start to notice that the main character who discovers this frog is not wanting to show beautiful art to the world and all that stuff. He just wants to get rich. He wants that sweet, sweet moolah. And so we laugh at the guy whenever he gets his, deserved comeuppance.
So lots of trivia for this one, as you would expect. This short has been selected for preservation by the Library of Congress in the National Film Registry, as it should. You have Duck Muck, you have What's Opera Doc in there as well, again, as they should. But I'm also glad they got Porky and Wacky Land in there. I mean, there are many other shorts worthy of being in that registry, but those four, I'm sure you can all agree, definitely belong in there. In the 1994 book of the greatest cartoons of all time, where they surveyed different historians and experts about what they think are the best cartoons ever made, this was the 5th greatest short of all time. And I can agree with its high placement too. So this is, of course, the first and only appearance of this frog character. Yes, I am aware of the sequel. Some people would even say it's a sequel that shall not be named, but one day I'll take a look at it, and I don't think it's that bad as some people seem to think it is. I will agree the sequel was unnecessary. This is a done-in-one that was just done perfectly, and that's that. Plus, the sequel was missing Mike Maltese, who by then had passed for about a decade or so. But here, the frog is not named at all, and he is known now as Michigan J. Frog, and the name comes from one of the songs within, which is the Michigan Rag. But he also had another name. So in the Bugs Bunny show, he was actually introduced as Enrico, which is kind of weird, isn't it? It doesn't feel right, does it? But no, that's what he was called at one point. But roughly in the 1970s, he was then given the name Michigan Frog. And as Chuck Jones explained it, he was doing an interview in the 70s, and he was being interviewed by Jay Cox. And as they were discussing the name, Jones mentioned that he suggested adding J in there, so Michigan J Frog, which I do agree. It does sound good. It sounds like the J was definitely needed there. So there you are. Some have also theorized that a name was created because people just wanted to know what the name of this frog actually is, because this, again, is one of the most famous animated shorts of all time. Now, one of the biggest mysteries of this short was who did the singing voice of the frog, because the frog is the only voice you hear in this whole short. There's no one else. In fact, there's not even a Mel Blanc credit, because at the time, Mel Blanc would get the sole credit, even if he was to do a small sound effect or whatever. That was in his contract, but since he didn't voice anything here, there was no credit at all, and the vocal credit was actually just kept blank. Jones himself actually misremembered who it was when asked who actually did the voice, and it's believed that he just mixed it up with another singer who did a Tom and Jerry short where Tom is singing an opera song. And they sound very familiar, to be fair, so this was just an innocent case of misremembering as far as I'm concerned. But eventually it was established, and this information comes from Keith Scott. If you haven't got his Cartoon Voices book, definitely do yourself a favor and get it, because it lists who did what. And even in one of his books, goes through a history of the different animated studios with a slight bent towards the vocal performers of the time. But the singing voice of the frog is a gentleman by the name of William Roberts, or Bill Roberts, and he was essentially a nightclub singer at the time. He was very popular, and he was constantly in demand. He had been in a few movies as well, but he was mainly known as a nightclub singer. You would have also heard his voice if you've seen the Tex Avery short Little Tinker, so he does a few of the different impersonations that the Little Tinker does when he does the singing.
One thing that now really makes me think when I think of this cartoon is that, curiously, I think 1 or 2 years later, Paramount, via their famed studio cartoons, they decided to make their own similar cartoon called Finnegan's Flea, which the best way to describe that cartoon is just One Froggy Evening, but more cynical and a little bit more darker, especially through the ending. That's one I'll let all of you to check out and later compare with One Froggy Evening.
Now, there are other bits of trivia, but I'm going to save those for when we actually go through the short itself, because I'll point it out as we go along. But my own personal experience with this short, I actually first saw this in the 1001 Rabbit's Tail movie, so the Bugs Bunny's third movie. And that's the movie where Bugs has to tell stories to Yosemite Sam's son. He plays a sultan in it for, I mean, he's been in all sorts of things, including an alien at one stage, so why not be a sultan at one point, right? But I watched it, and for the longest time, I just thought it ended when the frog was put into the new Cornerstone, and that was it. I didn't know there was an extra ending until I finally saw the short on the Looney Tunes Gold Collection Volume 2. Some of you might be going, what? You never saw the full thing before then? No, I only saw it in the 1001 Rabbit Tales. But seeing that ending, though, for the first time, the short go from, hey, I enjoy this, it's pretty good, to, whoa, okay, that's actually really brilliant. The cycle continues. Somebody else is trying to make a quick buck, and they're going to go through the exact same thing, albeit in the future.
I will say right now, in regards to the short film, I actually have a little bit of a history with this, and it's not a huge history per se, but I do remember seeing this cartoon a few times as a kid. And while I wouldn't say this was my introduction to the short, I do distinctively remember it on the Looney Tunes package feature 1001 Rabbit Tales. And I also own the Looney Tunes Golden Collection Volume 2. For the longest time, I didn't really have the best impression of the film and thought, this short is way too cynical and mean for its own good. I genuinely felt sorry for the man who wanted to make money from the frog, just from the basic concept of wanting to get rich from a singing frog. But upon reanalyzing the short film and looking at it nowadays, I think I've fully realized that it's actually more of a cautionary tale about when you try to exploit something for your own greedy benefits and the consequences of what could happen. The man could have just had the frog for himself and that could have been it, but seeing him try to exploit the singing frog and the frog basically just not even remotely performing whatever he tries to showcase to people, be it the stage manager or the audience he tries to get, that's perfect. Like, it's a perfect way to basically say, yeah, I am never going to perform for anyone.
So, before I actually get to the cartoon itself, allow me to tell you a funny story. So, when I was a kid, I once asked my grandpa what his favorite cartoon ever was. He couldn't really remember the name of it, but he could describe the main idea, like, so there's this frog who seems like a normal frog on the outside, but he has this beautiful singing voice if you caught him. But anytime this one guy would try to show the singing frog to other people, he would just sit there and croak like a normal frog. But every time it was just that guy and the frog alone, he would be back to singing again. Of course, young me had absolutely no idea what he was talking about because, well, I never actually saw the short as a kid and I just assumed it was rare. But again, I never really grew up on the Looney Tunes that much, which explains a lot. So, time passes and I'm starting to get into Looney Tunes more and finding those shorts on the internet. I came across One Froggy Evening at one point, randomly, and I decided to watch it. And I didn't really think much of it afterwards. All I just felt was, oh, it's just a popular Chuck Jones short, whatever, everyone knows what that is, and I moved on. And then later on, I don't know when or how this happened. Either the cartoon played on MeTV one time, or I was rewatching it on my phone randomly. But one day, Grandpa was seeing what I was watching, and he noticed the green frog wearing a top hat and singing Hello My Baby, and he yelled out, "Hey, I remember this one!" And I was like, wait, you do? And he said, do you remember that cartoon I was telling you about with the singing frog who performs for only one person? That's the one I've been talking about. And it all just came full circle. And it was just wonderful to see Grandpa being able to actually see this cartoon again and being able to laugh too. That actually got me to appreciate the cartoon a bit more. It did take me a while to understand what it was actually saying, but I started to warm up to it a bit more, mainly because of what Grandpa was doing and what he said, that it made me look at the cartoon another way. And I appreciate him for that, and I will forever miss Grandpa dearly. Now, as I said before, I used to not think much of this cartoon when I first saw it a few years ago. Some of us were just like kind of used to Chuck Jones being such a hugely popular director, and anytime his most iconic stuff played or I would actually finally watch the iconic stuff he made, I would be like, oh, that's just nothing. It's just a popular Chuck Jones cartoon. And I would just move on to watch the Looney Tunes shorts that I did actually want to see or pique my curiosity. But again, as time would move on and I would rewatch it a bit, I actually did start to appreciate it a bit more. And not just because of the grandpa story I told you about.
But one of the reasons this short works so well, and it's one of those things where every time I see this short, even though I've seen it so many times, I do always notice something new about it. And I think this time around, because I've watched all the Looney Tunes and, of course, Chuck Jones' career in order, as he's developed as an artist and as a director, where he was at this point. So he was favoring the more limited or stylized animation, knowing when to hold poses, and not the wild animation style that Bob Clampett was more famous for. They're both great. Think of them as like two different flavors of ice cream, okay? They're both great. But here, this is what Chuck Jones does best in my opinion, and that's pantomime. This short is almost like a Roadrunner short in that way, if you think about it. If you watch a Roadrunner short, it's just all pantomime. There's no dialogue. The strong poses and the animation that follows, and the music, of course, it all works together perfectly to sell the pantomime that Chuck Jones is going for. Now, you're not going to confuse this short and a Roadrunner short, but it's the same basic idea. The strong poses, the wonderful animation, and the music all come together to tell a story where this is one of those shorts that wouldn't have been translated when sent to different parts of the world, because it doesn't matter that the songs that the frog sings stays in English or not. You can watch this whole short, not know a single word of English, and you can follow it all and laugh your head off. And understand the message, because the way it's portrayed is so strong. Some have argued that this is Chuck Jones at his peak. That could be up for debate, because I know some people prefer Jones's 40s work and think he peaked more there. But that's, of course, all up for debate, and it's a matter of personal opinion. Some people even think Looney Tunes peaked at 1946, so the final year of Bob Clampett shorts, so it's all up for debate, I guess. But you can't deny that Chuck Jones was definitely on fire around this time, and even in the past few shorts I've looked at that have been a little bit on the weaker side, there's no denying that Jones was still a very strong director, especially when he worked with Mike Maltese. And the music aspect, and my good friend Manny Cruz, the Tooney Tenor, he's going to go through the songs and he'll go through some of the origins, because one of them was even written by Chuck Jones and Mike Maltese, funnily enough, and I'll keep you in suspense as to which song that is. But the music tells the story so well. I mean, one experiment you can try is watch this short but with no sound at all. You can follow the story and all, but it definitely loses something when you can't hear the music. And the music done here is by Milt Franklyn. While it would have been interesting to hear Carl Starling do the music, I honestly think Milt Franklyn was the better choice here to do this short. He did a lot more original compositions than Carl Starling did. Carl Starling used to always use musical cues and do a lot of musical puns, whereas Milt Franklyn will do a lot of original stuff. Except, of course, in this case, the frog singing the various songs that were turn-of-the-century Timpanelli type songs. But let's go through this short from start to finish, and once again, I'll point out some extra trivia as we go along, and my good friends are going to chime in as well. So, let's get into it as we start off with the construction site. And I love how the title cards start from a fully built wall to a cracked wall, and then just a window, and that's that. So it's a nice little touch, and gets us right into the whole Acme Building and Wrecking Company. So Acme have truly taken over just about every single industry you can imagine by this point. So everything's been torn down, and we don't linger too long on this. We just see enough to know that yes, the building's been torn down and that's that. And we see our main character here opening up the cornerstone of the J.C. Wilbur building. And Chuck Jones mentioned that that's a reference to Joseph Wilbur, and he was the comptroller for Leon Schlesinger Studios and for the Warner Brothers Cartoon Studios once Schlesinger sold the studio over to Warner Brothers. But even if you don't know who that is, and I certainly didn't for the longest time until I looked into it, what a perfect name for it, right? So he opens up the cornerstone, and we see the message. What I always get crack out of is that this was done in 1892, and yet why does this document, at least the top part, read as though it's something from centuries earlier than this? Even the music sort of suggests that it's like from a more medieval type setting. In any case, as he's reading, we see the frog. I've already mentioned that Jones loved to hold poses for a very long time, and you'll see a lot of that here. And he will do that mainly with the human characters, but with the frog, when he's a frog, he's all limp like a frog, just all droopy. And that looks so deceptively simple. It's actually hard to animate weight, to make something look like it's heavy when you're lifting up a frog from the ground that's trying to slink back to the ground. Even his expression as the normal frog is perfect as well. Is it any wonder that people love this character so much, despite only appearing in one short in the original run? So then at 1 minute, 14 seconds, everything just seemed like a normal story, nothing out of the ordinary. But we then see the magical moment where he grabs his cane and top hat and starts singing the very first song of the short. And it's the one that I would argue that most people are familiar with. I mean, heck, if you've seen Spaceballs and you haven't seen this, you would have heard this song, because they do a parody of it at the very end. I mean, the fact is a parody of Alien doing that dance, and they even got John Hurt to come back just for that cameo as his role from Alien. I mean, Mel Brooks is a genius, okay? Full stop.
I really love the main song that is featured in the entire cartoon, the Hello My Baby, Hello My Darling. I also really like the Michigan Rag song that is done halfway through the cartoon.
But yeah, we see this frog. He's just so lively and he's doing his little dance number here. And when we cut back to the human character, just the way he breaks the fourth wall with just his eyes. You don't need anything more than that. Just one still image, you just animate the eyes. And again, I followed Chuck Jones's career all throughout the years, covering each and every short in order. And one of the things he had a tendency to do, even from earlier on, is animate the eyes. And this is no exception. But one of my favorite bits of animation is actually rather subtle. So as soon as the frog does his little dance number, within a few frames, he just turns back into a normal frog and just looks all droopy and sad. Just that quick movement from, I guess, going from like an optimist to a pessimist, kind of. You could look at it that way, but it's so subtle. The effect is amazing. And again, Chuck Jones's animators didn't really have to do much to sell what's going to happen next. You just see the worker thinking, yep, I'm going to be a big shot. I love the details of his suit, by the way. It's just your stereotypical rich man of the time suit, isn't it? And that's a big top hat too. But not much is actually animated here, and yet everything is sold to you. His thought process, his eyes sell the thinking, and we see all dollar symbols everywhere as he's thinking, yep, I'm going to take this $1 million idea over to a talent agency.
What's cool about this short is that you could kind of interpret it in a few ways, even though this is really kind of a classic show business fable where, you have this one artist who really loves what they're doing and who really wants to do what they want to do, and then you have this person who wants to exploit that artistry. But you could really interpret what the frog really is in a lot of ways. You could either interpret this frog as someone who's just kind of really innocent and only trusts this one person to sing to, or you could just interpret it as a frog just screwing with the guy and just making his life just completely miserable.
And the funny thing is, it's hard for me to determine if the frog is genuinely messing with the guy or if he's doing it for the fun of it, or maybe he's got some sort of stage fright or whatever. The vagueness of that concept makes the short a lot funnier and also kind of mean for all the right reasons. Like, even though I said earlier that I used to think the short was too mean for its own good, I actually think it's mean for all the right reasons. Again, the man basically brought this on himself.
So again, Acme, they own a demolition company. Why not a theatrical agency? Because why not? And for those unaware, yes, there were manual phone operators at the time who would direct calls to the different offices. They didn't have an automatic switcher back then. Because yes, we're at a point where a lot of younger folk do not know this. So I know some of you who are older are going to roll your eyes when you hear such trivia, but no, you have to understand. We are at a point where people are not aware of such things, so I have to mention it. But I like how we briefly pan over and we see two starlets. So we see very briefly one starlet, and I'm trying to read what's in the background there, but I can't make it out. So if you know what it says, definitely let me know. And ashamedly, I'm terrible at reading cursive as well, so definitely let me know. But the second starlet that you see in this producer's office, she kind of reminds me of Clara Bow. I'm sure it's not her. She looks a little different, but it's just the face. It kind of reminds me of her. Or like a 1920s flapper girl type character. I can't seem to find if she was just a generic actress or not. So if she's supposed to be someone, or if you suspect of who it might be, let me know in the comments. So this is 1955, and the short would have been made a little earlier, of course. And one of the big things on television at the time were variety shows. So you would have a lot of people trying to get their big break and go on TV, showcasing whatever talent that they might have. They could be a comedian or a singer, musician, whatever. So that's what this is all about. So it's quite clear he's hoping to get a talent agency to represent him, to try and push him on either certain stage engagements or the big one being on TV. I guess one close equivalent would be how people would go on shows like The X Factor or The Voice. They all want to make the big time, and they're all doing their best to try and get selected. So this is another great example of music actually telling the story, where Milt Franklyn does a reprise of the actual Hello My Baby song in the actual office. And if you watch this without the music, I think the effect isn't as good. Again, it works so perfectly, and the animation is just so lively in the scene, while, again, this talent agent is just looking all skeptical, and he just stays that one held pose the entire time. In fact, in the entire scene, that talent agent only moves his eyes and nothing else. And remember what I was saying before about animating weight? This scene is a perfect example of that. The frog just wants to get all droopy again, while the man is trying to make this frog actually do the dance number. And even the frog's expression where he just croaks, just staring so blankly. But we see that the man is rather embarrassed at what's going on for that brief moment where he realizes, oh, this didn't work. You know what, I'm just going to dance. And then he just gets kicked out anyway. And so at 2 minutes and 45 seconds, our entire premise is now complete. The frog is only going to dance in front of the person that's discovered him in that cornerstone. And he does a wonderful song called The Michigan Rag. So the man pulls the talent agent out, and I think this is Ken Harris doing this scene because of the smear. I could be wrong, but he pulls him out, and wouldn't you know it, the song number is done. And again, the perplexed look of this talent agent here. Chuck really knew how to do so much with so little.
I think this is one of the best one-shots that Chuck Jones ever made. Not only is its content very strong, but it's one of his funniest in terms of visual facial expressions and silent acting. Chuck Jones often said a great way to view film, one way where you know you're watching a really good film is if you turn the sound off and you still understand what's going on. That is exactly One Froggy Evening in a nutshell. And of course, the frog is singing and dancing, but even beyond Bill Roberts' singing performance, you could easily watch this film completely muted and you could understand the story precisely, not just in terms of the hysterical and precise facial expressions and acting, but also in terms of the film's shot composition. A lot of the specific gags and scenarios work because of their specific layouts.
Also, just the idea of it alone is funny. And it just makes me wonder, like, what would happen in another way? Okay, so, like, imagine the guy who's exploring a frog who's like, all right, I'll be right back. I have to go to the bathroom. And he leaves the frog with the showbiz guy he's pitching it to. And as he's in the bathroom, the frog immediately sings and dances for, like, another person. And the guy is like, oh, my God, he is actually singing and dancing. You guys see it. And the two people are there, but it's still acting like a normal frog. You just have to wonder, is it a frog who's just messing with one specific person alone who knows exactly what he's gonna do if he found out about a singing frog? Or if it's just a frog who performs for only one person being around, but immediately turns back into a frog? You could interpret this a lot of ways, which I think is neat.
And the man ends up getting kicked out. Yeah, you'll notice Gribberick Theatrical Shoes, which makes sense to have such a store next to a theatrical agency, right? But that's named after layout artist Robert Gribberick, who worked with Chuck Jones. So the frog starts singing as our man looks across the road and he sees the Hippodrome, which is a theater for rent. As television became more and more popular, some of the theaters ended up closing down, and this would be most likely one of them. So we see that our main character lives in a modest house. It's not too shabby. Seems to be quite frugal, actually. Probably doesn't trust banks, that's why he keeps his money where his bed is, inside a sock. Although I don't think it's his house, given that he's homeless later on in the short. Maybe he's just renting here and can't afford the rent anymore. I'll assume that's the case. But he probably also flipped off his boss, so he doesn't have a job anymore. So that's what's great about the story. You don't even need to know all those extra details. You can fill in the gaps yourself and everything's fine. So we see that this whole theater has been renovated. I gotta say, if this man did all that renovation himself, he's done a pretty decent job. I like that the posters at the front says, Idax Human, the wonder of the world. But do you think someone would at least be curious about a singing frog just to see whether this person is a nutcase or not? But when we go in, probably my favorite bit of background is this actual theater, which looks like it's a rather UPA type design. But it works so well because you're not focused on the actual seating around or the balconies. No, you're focused on that spotlight, seeing our frog doing his little dance number on top of a tightrope. So the curtain goes down, and we get a really funny gag here. The man is like, you know what, free admission. Once you see it, you'll pay in the future. But we all know what does work. Free beer. And if you slow-mo that crowd actually running in, I just love the whole quote-unquote ugly character designs that Jones liked to use around this time. But we see that the curtain rope breaks. The man desperately tries to open up the curtain, but before the curtain can be opened, the frog ends up turning back into a normal frog. Now, this is also a great example of when not to play music for great effect and let the sound effects do the work. Because, yeah, he's singing along, he stops singing, and all you hear is the creak of the curtain rising, and we see this very, well, an ordinary frog. But the audience doesn't even give much of a chance to see what's going on. You'd think they would say, okay, we're here, now what? Or rather, they're probably asking where the beer is. That's probably what they're really doing. And the curtain falls down, and without fail, the audience just happens to have those vegetables with them. That seems to be a nice little staple in a lot of these things, but I would imagine the pumpkins would hurt. They're not exactly light. I mean, the tomatoes, sure, you can get away with, but pumpkin, wow. They must be really upset that they're not getting any beer. But we see that our main character is now homeless. Again, I think he was just renting that house. And the frog starts singing along again. Now, people who know me and have been following this channel for a fair while know that I love looking at old newspapers. And this one's an interesting one because it's not a flat newspaper to drive forward a story. It's just in the background. What all they've done here is they've just done an outline and then just pasted a newspaper and called it a day. So it's kind of got a really weird effect there. But there is a headline there saying Lionel Barrymore heiress. Now, Lionel Barrymore passed away in 1954, so that newspaper would have likely been some reference to his death, I'd say. And again, Chuck Jones, so much with so little. We don't even need to see a police officer fully animated at first, we just need to see the hat. And it just vibrates and it just tells us all we need to know that, oh, he's hearing some commotion in the park and he needs to deal with it. And as soon as we see the police officer enter in, there's really not much animation at all. We just got the held pose of the police officer, the man's finger just animated, and the frog just croaking, and that's it. There's really not much there, and yet it says all it needs to say.
When the guy's in the park and the police officer overhears what he assumes is the man singing, the one bit where he stops walking midway, he stops for a couple seconds, and then he scurries over, perfect. Like, you know exactly what is about to happen. The complete lack of dialogue and the simplicity in the body gestures, it's perfect. It tells you exactly what we need to know about what is going to happen to the man.
How tall is this police officer anyway? And how strong is he too to be able to lift up this man who doesn't exactly look like a lightweight, but we see he's taken to a psychopathic hospital, which would be a play on the psychiatric hospital, which at the time, if you read up what they were actually doing in those hospitals, well, it's quite depressing, so yeah, pretty bad. So any wonder he's got a rather stern look being inside that hospital, and why he's got that look about him when he's actually leaving.
Weirdly enough, I think like one of my favorite gags from this short is when the guy is immediately taken to like, should I say a sane asylum or mental hospital? You know, he gets thrown into the crazy place. You have this frog who's singing, "Please don't talk about me when I'm gone," which is a lovely song. But the thing that kills me about it is that you see this shot and the frog is just standing on the window and he's singing, belting, having the time of his life. And then in the background, you just see the guy who's looking at the wall and he just looks so done with it.
You do have to wonder how long he was in that hospital for. And the fact that the only clothes he owns are just those tattered clothes he's wearing. Again, you don't need to know any of that stuff. I'm just filling in the gaps just for the heck of it. All in good fun.
And then you get that delicious, delicious ending where the guy is turned completely poor. His clothes are messy, all because of this one frog. And he decides enough is enough. And he puts back that singing frog into the exact same location where he found it, a construction site.
There's a grand dedication to a new 40-story building, and this building is the Tregoreth Brown building, and that's a reference to sound effects man Treg Brown, who had been doing the sound effects for, by this point, just over 2 decades. So as I mentioned before, this is where the short ends if you're watching 1001 Rabbit Tail. But no, you get another 45 or so seconds, which delivers a beautiful punchline, where we go now to the year 2056. I'm recording this in 2025, so we've got a lot of catching up to do if we want our future to look like this and to build those disintegrator guns.
And you know, in the 1950s, of course the future is portrayed with these wacky-looking mid-century machines with these ray guns and people wearing astronaut helmets. And we get to that exact same location in the future, and you see this guy using a ray gun to disintegrate a specific part of the building. And he finds that exact same box, and the frog pops out to sing "Hello, My Baby" again. And then that guy gets the exact same thought. He wants riches, and he immediately takes the frog with him to try to exploit his art, just like the guy before.
I just like the fact that Acme is still around even in 2056, so They must have some strong leadership for a company, or maybe they're just the only company left by that point. I don't know. But I've always loved 1950s sci-fi space type designs where everyone's going to dress up like they're spacemen even though they're on Earth. But we get a repeat of the very beginning. And the only bit that sort of bothered me, not too much, I can't be too harsh here, but we get a repeat of the animation from earlier on where he's doing the dance number, but the lips don't sync to the actual song being sung at this point.
Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal. Send me a kiss by wire. Baby, my heart's on fire.
I don't know why it wasn't just reanimated to sync to it, but in any case, it's not that big a deal. It's just something I've always noticed when rewatching this scene. But we then see our new leading man, or at least if this short was continuing, we'd be following him, who decides, yep, he's going to be rich, and the cycle continues on and on and on for who knows how long. And we end right there.
And it is a classic case of, well, here we go again. Because this really is just the story of show business, if you think about it. These big wigs, whether or not they're big at the studio or just normal people who really did live normal lives until something like this could happen, trying to exploit someone's artistry, but ends up getting their comeuppance, mainly because either the artist just wants to do what he wants to do on their own terms, or just because they're screwing with them. It's a classic, classic story. As I said before, One Froggy Evening is my grandpa's favorite cartoon ever. I didn't understand what he was talking about when he described the plot because, again, I hadn't seen it as a kid. But actually watching it with him when he finally recognized what he was talking about kind of made me appreciate the cartoon even more, and now I actually genuinely love the cartoon. It's a genuinely hilarious tale. I'm gonna give One Froggy Evening a 9 out of 10. There's a lot of wonderful pantomime storytelling and animation. Bill Roberts' voice as a singing frog is absolutely delightful, and Milt Franklyn's score in particular, that is a really good score. He does a great job here.
For all intents and purposes, too, I think the best way to view this cartoon is not only a cautionary tale of using something special for your own greedy purposes, I think it's also a morality on profit over art. You could genuinely view the frog as a symbol of artistic integrity, not meant to be viewed by the mainstream public. I could be wrong about that. I don't know if that was Chuck Jones or Mike Maltese's intention when they created the short, but it does explain why Michigan J. Frog probably never wanted to reveal himself to the public. And again, as I said before, I don't know whether it's because he was messing with the man or he just doesn't want the attention, but hey, more power to the frog, I always say. 70 years later, and this film is still a bona fide masterpiece. My overall rating of the film is honestly either an 8 or a 9. For all intents and purposes, I think it's really solid.
This is an excellent cartoon by Chuck Jones, and obviously his writing partner Mike Maltese. Really funny short, a big 10 out of 10, one of the all-time classic Looney Tunes shorts that you can easily find on DVD and also now on Blu-ray, thanks to the Platinum collections being once again back on print on Blu-ray. So go check it out. And that's all that I have to say about this all-time classic short, and I'll see you all later in another review.
So I've been prattling on long enough, so my good friend Manny Cruz, the Tooney Tenor, is going to go through the musical part of this short. I mean, I had to get someone who knows a thing or two about music on this review, so take it away, Manny. Thank you, Manny.
Hi, everyone. This is Manny Cruz, the Tooney Tenor, coming at you with the latest edition of It's Time for Manny's Music Time, with music trivia for you today. I need a drink. There goes my Simpsons reference for the day, even though I don't drink. So anyway, what am I talking about? Yes, this is the latest edition of Manny's Music Time for the 1955 Merry Melody cartoon, One Froggy Evening, directed by Chuck Jones, and with musical direction by Milt Franklyn. Now, it would have made absolutely no sense for me to not appear in this cartoon because not only it is one of the most famous Warner Brothers shorts ever created, but has a lot of music in it. So literally the entire plot of the cartoon is about a singing frog. Good old Michigan J. Frog. As Anthony explained earlier, he received his name years later based on the song The Michigan Rag, which comes from this cartoon, with lyrics by the writer of this cartoon, Michael Maltese. And also what Anthony mentioned, that when Michigan appeared on the Bugs Bunny show back in the 60s, that he was called Enrico. To explain the origin of that name, I'm assuming, this is off the top of my head, but more than likely, Michigan's original name was based off Enrico Caruso, arguably one of the most famous opera singers in history, and he was a huge force in music in the early period of recorded music, because back in the early 1900s, when recordings were still new, records and wax cylinders and things of that nature, you had to have a singer who could project and everything for it to be heard, because microphone technology wasn't to the level that it would become in like the 1930s, that you needed people who are trained opera singers or people who know to project their voice. And Caruso sold a ton of records in that time period because of, just opera being that type of music that you're able to project your voice. And as you heard earlier on in this particular commentary, I was using the voice that I would use if I was performing opera, since that's what my training is in classical music. And just a little bit more about Caruso himself. So Caruso was born February 25th, 1873 in Naples, Italy, or Napoli, and he passed away August 2nd, 1921 in his hometown of Napoli in Naples. And Caruso, he performed all over the world. Obviously, he performed in the big houses in Europe. He performed at La Scala di Seta in Italy. He performed at the Metropolitan Opera in New York City. And in his lifetime, he recorded around 250 recordings between 1902 to 1920. And when you think about it, you think of artists now, like who are the big selling artists of this time period? Taylor Swift, Bad Bunny, things of that nature. If you want to go back in time and say the 80s, you got Michael Jackson and Prince and Lionel Richie, Madonna 70s, you got the Eagles, you got Fleetwood Mac, you got Led Zeppelin the 60s, obviously the Beatles, you have a lot of the Motown acts. But if you keep going back in time, Caruso was the biggest thing in recorded music. Strange to hear that it would be an opera singer, but like I was saying before, the recording technology of that time would not allow for the little nuances of singers that didn't project, as well as certain instruments that didn't exist at the time, like electric guitars and so on and so forth. And speaking of, like I said, when microphones started being really used in recording technology, that's when singers, crooners, guys like Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra really started coming along. Because prior to that, without microphones, you would have had a really difficult time hearing those particular singers. But we don't have any trouble hearing our friend Michigan, whose voice was provided by Bill Roberts, once again, is what Anthony stated. So this obviously is one of the most famous cartoons ever made, and arguably one of the most well-known Warner Brothers shorts. Let's talk a little bit about the musical cues, shall we? So the cartoon starts off, obviously, with the Merry Melodies theme song, Merrily We Roll Along, and it goes right into some original cues. Again, this is a dream of mine one day to get to go inside the archives to see the cues that are not like published pieces of music, because I have information for the cues of, like I said, published songs or songs that are in the public domain or anything like that, but things that were specifically written by the music directors at the studio. Obviously Carl Stalling, Milt Franklyn, Norman Spencer, Bernard Brown, William Lava, things like that. I don't have access to that information. Hopefully one day I will. But the first cue that you hear, and arguably the most famous cue of this particular cartoon, is "Hello, my baby. Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal." It's kind of late, and I don't want to really go all out.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal. Send me a kiss by wire. Baby, my heart's on fire. If you refuse me, honey, you lose me. Then you'll be left alone. Oh, baby, telephone and tell me I'm your own.
So, in researching, hit my microphone. Well, the microphone didn't exist at the time that Michigan was put inside the little, I forgot what they call that, like the stone thingy that you put for the building. Wow, I should have done the research for that. But anyway, so in doing the research for this particular cartoon, I found a great website which gave me a ton of information, but it also gave me a little bit of a nostalgia rush because it looks like a website straight out of the late 90s, early 2000s in the way that it's formatted. So I want to shout out in particular the blog Croaking Out a Tune. What a brilliant name. Chef's kiss all around. And if you want to look it up, it's froggyeve.tripod.com. So right there, tripod.com, as the kids say, that's a bit of a throwback. So, but yeah, going back to the cues themselves, and again, this website was just a phenomenal source of information for looking at the cues. It saved me a ton of time because I'm already late in recording this thing. So sorry, Anthony. So going back to the main song, Hello, My Baby. Now, the song itself was actually written after Michigan was put inside the little Cornerstone. It was written in 1899, and the music is by Ida Emerson and Joseph E. Howard. So, information that I'm going to read comes from the Croaking Out of Tune website. Oh my goodness, just like the puns write themselves. So anyway, and I quote, "In the real world, Hello, My Baby was one of the biggest musical hits in the United States back in 1899. It is an extremely memorable Tin Pan Alley ragtime tune, which was recorded by many artists over the years from Arthur Collins to Judy Garland. The song is a tune about a man who telephones a faraway girl every day who he has never seen. Each day he tries to woo her over the phone, eventually getting her name and address. But he knows that due to distance and interlopers, he can lose her, so he plans to keep her by calling her every day. The telephone was an emerging technology in the day, and this was one of the first times it was mentioned in the song. Because of this, it acquired the nickname of the telephone rag. The success of this song led the team to write a sequel to it, I Lost My Baby. We learned that our singer's fears are justified as he seems to lost his best, or I guess his bae. So this is kind of like the late 1800s version of sliding into a DM, and then she ghosts you. So keeping it nice and topical for this day and age. And a little more information about the songwriting team, I quote, "The song was written by the team of Joseph Howard and Ida Emerson, who performed together in vaudeville for many years and were married for a while. One of Howard's 9 marriages. Yikes. That's 9 more than I've been married. Wow." So unquote. So yeah, but this song, I mean, pretty much it's ubiquitous with this particular cartoon. And usually whenever this cartoon is parody, you hear this particular song. And I mean, it still holds up really well. And obviously the amazing score that was written by Milt Franklyn. And of course, Bill Roberts' phenomenal performance as Michigan J. Frog in it. It's phenomenal. There's a little more information I got from Wikipedia that I wanted to mention. So I quote, "Additionally, the word hello itself was primarily associated with telephone use after Thomas Edison uttered it. And by 1889, hello girl was slang for a telephone operator, though it later became a general greeting for all situations," unquote. So I'm thinking, yeah, every time you pick up a phone, hello, as opposed to ahoy hoy. There's my second Simpsons reference for the day. Didn't think that was coming, huh? Ha ha. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Everybody do the Michigan ride. Everybody likes the Michigan ride. Every Mame and Jane and Root stop, romp, pump the Michigan, jump, clump, pump the Michigan ride. That loving ride.
So the Michigan Rag, as I mentioned before, is an original composition. So a little bit more information. This was definitely not written in the 1800s. It was written in the 1950s. It says 1955, but assuming when the production of this cartoon, this cartoon was released in late December of 1955. So more than likely, this song was written in 1955. The words and music are by 3 people. You have Michael Maltese, the writer of this cartoon, Chuck Jones, the director, and Milt Franklyn, the musical director at Warner Brothers at the time. It was him and Carl Stalling going back and forth, and eventually a few years later, Carl Stalling would retire in 1958. As I've said before, we know Milt Franklyn was Carl Stalling's right-hand man ever since 1936. Franklyn was Stalling's orchestrator for the arrangements that Carl Stalling would do. And from this website, I quote, "Fans often wonder if all the songs in One Froggy Evening are authentic tunes or whether they were written just for this cartoon. As it turns out, only one song was written specifically for this film, The Michigan Rag. The writer and director, Maltese and Jones, tried to pick real ragtime or Tin Pan Alley tunes for the frog, but they couldn't find the right piece to use during one section. The result was a creation of their own, meant to sound like an authentic 1890s ragtime tune. Maltese supplied most of the lyrics, but Jones and composer Milt Franklyn helped create it. As it turns out, this song helped provide a name for the frog years later when Chuck Jones gave in to years of fans asking, "What is that frog called?" unquote. So as we mentioned before, he was called Enrico at one point, but eventually Michigan J. Frog became his name, and it's all because of this song. So thank you, Jones, thank you, Maltese, and thank you, Franklin, for your contribution. So the next one is the song Come Back to Erin.
Come back to Erin, my boy.
So this one is actually, I think, the oldest one of the compositions in this cartoon. So it was written in 1866, and the words and music were by a composer named Clarabelle, and I'll give you a little bit more information about Clarabelle in a moment. So, I quote, "The next song in One Froggy Evening is the sentimental tune Come Back to Erin. Erin is another name for Ireland, and the voice in this piece belongs to someone there who longs for a loved one named Colleen who is away in England. Clarabelle was the pen name of Charlotte Allington Barnard, who was born in 1830 and died in 1869. She was a prolific and successful English poet and composer of ballads and hymns during the 19th century. In 1868, she had two popular hits, I Cannot Sing the Old Songs and this one, Come Back to Erin, which is her most successful composition. Over time, it became thought of as an Irish folk song, and a generation later, it would become popular on the American vaudeville stage where such Irish songs were common." Unquote. So I was looking at the cue sheet. It had unknown for the composer, but thankfully we have that information now. So let's move on ahead, shall we? The next cue is a song that I'm a big fan of because I've heard it in multiple Warner Brothers shorts. I'm Just Wild About Harry.
Wild about Harry, and Harry's wild about me. Oh, I'm just wild about Harry, and he's just wild about, cannot do without, he's just wild about me.
So this song was written in 1921. So another one that is anachronistic considering the setting of when Michigan was put in there. But I really like the way Michigan is dancing when he sings this one. I always get a kick out of it. And the words and music are by U.B. Blake and Noble Sissel. So I'm Just Wild About Harry. It's been used in other Warner Brothers shorts. The first one I could think of is Yankee Doodle Daffy, where Daffy performed this one, and it's featured in other Warner Brothers shorts. So here's a little information about the song and the composers as well. And I quote, "Noble Sissel and U.B. Blake were two pioneering African-American songwriters who began their careers in the early 1900s. The two met as part of a group called Joe Porter Serenaders in 1915. Together, they wrote their first song, It's All Your Fault, also known as The Story of My Life." And continuing on, and I quote, "After splitting apart for a while, they were encouraged to try entering the," and this is in quotes, "white vaudeville circuit. There weren't many black teens because only one black was allowed per show," unquote, and unfortunately another aspect of the troubled history of the United States in terms of racial discrimination and a lot of talent that existed at the time, not just for black composers, but as well as other composers of color and also women composers that never really had the opportunity to flourish in that time because of the prejudices that existed then. But it is cool to see that this song was written by two black men, and the one that I mentioned before was written by a woman, as well as Hello, My Baby. So it was cool to see some strides for women and for people of color in that time. Continuing on, I quote, "Sissel and Blake went ahead with the idea, calling themselves the Dixie Duo. Their act used a piano as the only prop and performed without blackface and became very successful. In 1921, this writing team decided to organize one of their first musicals to be written, produced, and directed by black people. They called it Shuffle Along, and it launched on May 23rd, 1921. It became extremely successful and served as a launching pad for a number of black performers. The most popular tune to emerge from it was I'm Just Wild About Harry." One final tidbit. This song was written long before Harry Truman ran for president, but it was rewritten and used during his campaign. Blake said that he strongly supported Truman because he integrated the armed forces, unquote. So I've been wanting to talk about these two songwriters. I was going to wait until the commentary for Yankee Doodle Daffy, but I'm glad I got to talk about it for this one because this is another famous use of this song. This is probably one of my favorite songs that I hear in Warner Brothers shorts, so it's always cool to talk about it. The next one we have is called Throw Him Down, McCloskey.
Throw him down, McCloskey, what's to be the battle cry? Throw him down, McCloskey, you can lick him if you try. And future generations with wonder and delight will read on history's pages of the great McCloskey fight.
It was written in 1890, and the words and music are by John W. Kelly. And here's a little information about this one, and I quote, "The next song in One Froggy Evening is a famous tune from 1890 called Throw Him Down, McCloskey. The performer who made this song famous was the energetic vaudeville star Maggie Klein. Klein was tall and athletic and had a reputation as an enthusiastic performer who could work a crowd while using the entire stage as she moved about. Klein performed for over 40 years, and the song Throw Him Down, McCloskey proved to be her biggest hit. Whenever she performed this song, it was as much of a reenactment of the fight as it was a performance, typically involving furniture and other items being thrown about the stage and stagehands punctuating the chorus with the sounds of a struggle. It was considered quite a spectacle to see." According to an interview in the World magazine in January 1914, she acquired the song from composer John W. Kelly for $2 and asking him if he had any loose songs about him. Reportedly, she once commented that there was only one man she ever met who didn't like the song, and that her father who told her, "Maggie, it ain't ladylike." So, what is this song about? Did McCloskey win? Well, it's a story of an interracial fight staged between McCloskey and another man. In the chorus, they're trying to get him to do it by talking about how famous it'll make him. As it turns out, his opponent still doesn't show, but the crowd still expects to fight. So another Irishman, Pete McCracken, is convinced to fill in. The remainder of the song is a description of the fight, which goes on for 47 rounds, eventually drawing in more people and leaving both men injured. So it's about a boxing match. Pretty cool, huh? The next one we have is Won't You Come Over to My House, which was written in 1906. Another anachronism. Gosh, I hope somebody got fired for that blunder. There's my third Simpsons reference for the day.
Won't you come over to my house? I've lots of playthings, a dolly or two. We live in the house across the way.
So this is another composition by Egbert van Alstyne and Harry Williams, who I've spoken about in other Manny's Music Times. And here's some info about this song. And this is the one, well, I mean, if you watch the cartoon, you're going to know exactly when you hear these songs. Because fortunately with this cartoon, since everything is sung, you know exactly when these songs pop up. So, I quote, "The sentimental song, Won't You Come Over to My House, is one of a number of popular songs created by the team of Egbert van Alstyne and Harry H. Williams during the early part of the 20th century. The song tells of a woman who sees a lonely baby girl crying. Oh, you poor thing. The woman is moved by the sight, picks her up, and invites the girl to come play at her house. At the end of the song, we realize she was so moved by the child, she had a girl like her who died not that long ago." Oh, wow. This is actually a lot more sad than I realized it. Because, I don't know, like, wow. Yeah, like, it just hit me right now. I was like, wow, that's like a lot more sentimental and deep than I anticipated it to be.
I'll give you candy and sweet things. I'll put your hair in a curl. Won't you come over to my house and play that you're my little girl?
Oh, great. So I'm going to break out in tears now while I'm recording this. No, but yeah, it's actually pretty somber and poetic. And a little bit more about the team of Van Alstyne and Harry Williams. Other songs that have been in Warner Brothers cartoons that they composed include In the Shade of the Old Apple Tree, Cheyenne, and What's the Matter with Father, which is what I say about my own dad all the time. So, got two more to go, folks. The next one, and I'm actually surprised that I've gone this long recording Manny's Music Time without talking about this particular piece of music, which, as an opera singer, an opera guy who studied it, and a fan of these cartoons my entire life, and this song is very special to me. I will talk about it when I get to the commentary for notes to you. But what is this song? Or it's actually an aria, which is a song featuring a soloist in opera. Largo al factotum, from the opera Il Barbiere di Siviglia, or The Barber of Seville, which was written in 1816 by the great Italian opera composer Gioacchino Rossini. Rossini, born in 1792 and died in 1868. So yes, opera fans and fans of Warner Brothers cartoons, this song has been done a gazillion times on Warner Brothers shorts, in other studios. Of course, there's Magical Maestro, probably the best use of this aria in animation. It was also used in a Woody Woodpecker short. So I could literally spend hours talking about this particular opera aria being used in animation. I actually wrote a paper about it in grad school. So a little quick tidbit about the song in the background. Quote, Gioacchino Rossini was a famous Italian composer best known for his operas, over 36 in all. Among his most famous works is a comedy called, like I said, Il Barbiere di Siviglia, or The Barber of Seville. One of the arias within the opera is Largo al factotum, and it was this piece which Michigan J. Frog sang to get his owner in trouble for disturbing the piece. This was a popular piece among the people making Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies. Besides One Froggy Evening, there were many other cartoons which used portions of the aria. Some of them include Rhapsody Rabbit, Long-Haired Hare, You Ought to Be in Pictures, Notes to You, and Back Alley Uproar, unquote. So yeah, the Warner Brothers staff, Carl Stalling, Milt Franklyn, they love this one. And the character Figaro, the main character of the opera, he's pretty much just talking about, hey, like everywhere I go, everybody's like, hey, Figaro, Figaro, where are you going, dude? I'm the coolest guy in town. And it's a hard song to sing. I mean, it's written for a baritone. I'm not a baritone, I'm a tenor. I could perform it, but especially when the higher parts, it's cooler to hear a man with a lower voice hit those higher parts. And of course, the most famous part, Figaro, 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 Figaro. He's pretty much saying, everywhere I go, Figaro here, Figaro there, Figaro up, Figaro down. I can't go anywhere because everybody knows who I am. I'm the big shot. It's like the top man. I'm the big shot in town, pretty much. He's bragging to an extent. Like I said, when I get to know to you, I'll probably go more in depth of my personal history with this song and its connection to my love of Warner Brothers cartoons. Now, the last one we have, we come to the very end. This song is really outside of the time range. This is from 1930. Please Don't Talk About Me When I'm Gone. And it's written by Sidney Clare, Sam Stept, and B. Palmer.
Please don't talk about me when I'm gone. Oh, honey, though our friendship ceases from now on.
There's a recording of this one. I forgot exactly who sang it, but there's a recording on YouTube. I think it's from the 30s as well, that I really love that rendition of it. So here's some info, and I quote, the next song in One Froggy Evening is Please Don't Talk About Me When I'm Gone. It first charted in 1931. It was sung by Gene Autry. It's regarded as a classic breakup song, imploring the other to just try to forget about what they had and to keep quiet about their time together. Sidney Clare, 1892 to 1972, was a Tin Pan Alley songwriter who got his start on the vaudeville circuit. Later on, he found his way into Hollywood, where he worked on music for over 50 films, including some very successful ones. He co-wrote on The Good Ship Lollipop and I Think You're Ducky, which was used as the Looney Tunes theme song from 1933 to 1936. Unquote. I completely forgot about that. Oh, cool. So, you know, that one, the Looney Tune theme for Buddy, as well as for the early Porky Pig period. Now, the other songwriter, Sam Stept, was born in Russia in 1897. His family moved 3 years later to Pittsburgh, where he grew up. Stept joined a publishing house as a staff pianist and then tried vaudeville. During the 1920s, he began collaborating with an assortment of writers. On such collaborations, he created Please Don't Talk About Me When I'm Gone. Like Claire, he wound up writing for Hollywood, but eventually focused on music publishing. But yeah, and B. Palmer, the only information I could see is she was born in 1894 and passed away in 1967. I really got to find that rendition of it. It's so nice. So yeah, whoo, I could keep going on and on about this particular cartoon. So the last thing I want to talk about for this cartoon is, I like this cartoon. It's a classic. It's one of the best ones the studio made, hands down. It's one of the most famous cartoons in history. But I don't go as crazy for it as other people do. I know it's sacrilegious, you know, me saying this, A, a Looney Tune fanatic, and B, a musician. It's like, you don't like One Froggy Evening? Anthony, please put in the clip of me talking negatively about this cartoon in the clip from The Simpsons. Oh, you terrible man, be quiet. That one specifically. But yeah, like, I guess this is how certain people feel about What's Opera Doc. That's my personal favorite Warner Brothers short, but some people are like, it's a great short, but it's, I don't want to say it's overrated, but it's like maybe overplayed. I think that's how I feel about this one. I mean, I watch it. It is a great short. Don't get me wrong, and everything clicks. The music, the comedy, the animation, all that. You know, Jones, Maltese, and Franklyn are just batting 1,000 on this one. But I don't go crazy for it as much as other people. That's been my opinion for years. Maybe one day it'll change. So feel free to put mean comments and Manny, you suck in the comments and all that other stuff. And Manny, you're a hack. And maybe you should be put inside the little stone thing in 2025. And hopefully I'll survive until, it was 50 years from now would be 2075. So I would be 87 years old. Hopefully I can make it up that long. Well, as long as they give me like food and water in that little hole. And, you know, never mind. I'm just thinking too much. And it's late. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are my thoughts on One Froggy Evening. So thanks once again for joining me in the latest edition of Manny's Music Time. Please follow me on social media at the Tooney Tenor, TheTooneyTenor. For, did I spell that right? Whatever, it's late. For my updates on my life as a musician and as a nerd of various pop culture franchises, of course, my biggest love will always be the original Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies of this period. Thanks for listening. Enjoy this humongous commentary that will be coming your way from me, Anthony, and all our other friends in the Looney bin. And I'll see you soon, all right? That's all, folks. And how can I close it out like Michigan and J. Frog? Oh.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal.
Send me a kiss by wire. Baby, my heart's on fire. If you refuse me, honey, you'll lose me and you'll be left alone. Oh, baby, telephone and tell me I'm your own. Yeah, I do need a drink. Bye.
What the hell is that?
Look, it's going to be obvious I'm giving this 10 out of 10, so I'll get it out of the way. It is a masterpiece. It is also one of those shorts where, okay, even if it's not your favorite, even if it's not your go-to short, you can't deny that it's perfect. I do agree with Spielberg saying that this is the Citizen Kane of animated shorts. Now, I love Citizen Kane, but it's not my favorite movie. But I can appreciate it as the masterpiece that it is, and Citizen Kane is a 10 out of 10 movie. I mean, everything just works perfectly. The story, the animation, the music, I mean, what more can I say? Well, my good friend Matt Hunter, he just wanted to mention two things that none of us really have mentioned. Hey, he's a good friend of mine. I definitely wanted him on this one in some way, even if it's a small bit this time round. So, take it away, Matt.
Matt Hunter here. Anthony, I think pretty much everything has been said about One Froggy Evening, and I think you've covered pretty much everything, but I do think I should point out a couple of things about Michigan J. Frog's lasting impact. I don't know how many people know the cartoon's title, One Froggy Evening, but if you mention the singing frog, they know exactly what you're talking about. In fact, singing frog is a common term among auto mechanics, because anyone who's ever gone to a car mechanic and had a car problem that drives them crazy, but it doesn't manifest itself when it's being looked at in the shop, definitely understands the frustration that the guy in the cartoon feels. I also have to point out that Michigan J. Frog as a character is obviously cursed. And life imitates art, because when Warner Brothers formed the WB-TV network back in 1995, they chose the frog as its mascot, and the channel barely lasted a decade.
And yeah, on a personal note, it's taken me 5 years to get to this point, and there's still a lot of good stuff coming out. Yes, the decline has unfortunately started, and we're going to start getting a lot of retreads, and the animation quality will go down, among other things, but I'm going to savor this moment. I finally did the review for One Froggy Evening, and this is also the last short of 1955, so next up will be the year in review. I mean, spoiler alert, this will be probably the best short of 55. I mean, I think so, but you'll have to wait for the video to confirm if I've changed my mind or not on that front. But thanks to all my guests for joining me all throughout this review, this extra long review, which I think this short deserves it. I'm sure you'll agree with that. And thank you all for watching, and until next time, take care.
Send me a kiss by